welcoming you all. So good to see you all today. Thank you so much also for muting yourselves, everybody. If you do have a question throughout the presentation, feel free to pop it into the chat box, and we will have time for Q&A as well. Hope you're having a beautiful day. It's very nice and sunny where I am. Very happy to be here with you all right now. All right, so I'll be starting in about a minute. Just want to be here to let people join in as we go along. Very nice to see some familiar names as well, and good to see some new names. Lovely to have you all here. Beautiful. So I might begin, everybody, just now and then. I might just check that participant list just to make sure that no one's waiting in the waiting room. So welcome to the Feel Good Diet webinar. I'm going to be taking you through an approach to eating that is going to boost your mood. And I think that, you know, seeing as we've come out of this quite traumatic time over the past maybe 3 to 4 years now, I think it's a good time to be thinking about eating for mental well-being, not just eating for health or eating for diet, eating for weight loss and things like that. So it's possibly more of a novel approach to tailoring your diet to feel good, to feel better. Now let's have a look at what's in store for us today. The takeaways hopefully will be to give you some of the foundational knowledge on what your joy chemistry is in your body and how you can use foods to boost your natural joy chemistry. So I'll be talking you through the important chemicals that you produce internally, telling you how to make more of them and what to eat to make more of them, but also giving you a few other tips as well, because, you know, that's what I do, working with herbs and nutrients and that sort of thing. So by the end of today, you should be able to transform your diet to boost your mood and your energy and your stress tolerance. A lot of the hard work's being done for you, everybody. I'll be giving you diet plans to take away, supermarket maps to take away, so that you'll be able to do this easily. And to help you navigate as well your next grocery shop. So I've broken down the supermarket into different sections, and each section has a particular role to play in boosting certain types of feel-good chemicals. So I wanted to make it as straightforward as possible for you. I have a background in teaching naturopathy academically, so please let me know if I'm not making sense, because sometimes it's, you know, it can get quite technical. So please just feel free to say, you know, what do you mean, or ask me to explain further if you're not sure about something as I'm talking you through the slides. So that's our takeaways for today. And in terms of how the webinar will be laid out, we'll be first looking at what these joy chemicals are, where you make them and why you need them. We'll move into looking at how you can eat to feel good. So which foods relate to which of these chemicals. And finally, we'll have a look at some sample diets. And then after that, we'll have time for Q&A. So I'd love to start off today by just asking you all a quick question. There is a poll coming up here that you hopefully will see on your screen. And I'd love you to just pop in your answers here about the types of symptoms that you might personally be experiencing. That can point me towards which chemicals I should perhaps even focus on more today. Thanks, everybody. That's amazing. Yeah, really good to know. I mean, I definitely would be filling in a few of these myself if I could, but I'm not allowed to as the admin. Okay, amazing. So we've got choices, mood fluctuations, mood swings, difficulty with cognition and memory, anxiety and worry, food cravings, lack of motivation and drive. So predominantly it's things like food cravings that seem to be affecting the majority of us. Just going to show you the results of this now. We have quite a large proportion of us with difficulty focusing and remembering things. So definitely we'll need to be looking at things like serotonin and endorphins today. Difficulty with anxiety or worry and mood fluctuations seem to be less prominent. So that's really good. Lack of motivation and drive, though, is quite a key one, isn't it? Yeah. So dopamine will play a role with that one as well. Amazing. Thanks, everybody. That's wonderful. Let's have a look at our first section here. So, actually, just forgot almost to tell you a little bit about what I do. It's probably going to be helpful. I'm a naturopath and herbalist. I have postgraduate training in the management of complementary medicines. So that means looking at things like interactions between complementary medicines and pharmaceutical drugs, also looking at how we can refine our prescriptions for better effects. My areas of expertise are predominantly working with women's health and gastrointestinal health. So with women's health, things like reproduction, fertility, and health throughout the menopause. For gastrointestinal conditions, I mainly focus on inflammatory style conditions. And I also work with adrenal function, chronic fatigue, and sleep issues as well. So sleep, mood, adrenals tend to go together. My training is in naturopathy and Western herbal medicine and nutrition, and I have some training in Chinese herbal medicine and Ayurvedic lifestyle. I do tend to think of people as more than just their physiology, so I look at the whole holistic concept of us, everything from the way that we eat, the impressions we take in every day, through what we see, what we feel, what we listen to. I think everything plays a role in our health and well-being. I'm available for consultations online, face-to-face in Woollahra and Mona Vale in Sydney. And please do feel free to reach out. You've got my email here if you had questions about today, or if you wanted to just touch base, even ask me anything, you've got my email there. So let's move on and have a look at our joy chemistry. I'm going to focus on 4. So the very first one I'd like to talk about is serotonin. We'll also look at dopamine and oxytocin and endorphins. I've focused on these joy chemicals because I think they're particularly relevant today. We have very busy and hectic lifestyles, and the people that I see coming through clinic quite often, these are the ones that they will tend to present as more deficient in. So I think this is a good place to start, but there are others, that would be worth considering in the future. So serotonin, what is its main role in the body? It's really about mood. Serotonin, if you have issues with, self-love and sense of well-being and comfort, comfort in who you are, what you're doing with your life, where you're living, etc. Serotonin is going to be adequate or high if you're feeling good in all of those areas. But if you've got, any feelings of, lack of self-worth, lack of self-love, or maybe even sometimes anger towards self, or just feeling uneasy about who you are and where you are in your life, serotonin may possibly be low in those situations. Serotonin does play a role in stabilizing our mood, so it helps to prevent fluctuations of mood. So mood swings is one area where serotonin can be low. It helps with appetite control as well, and sense of self-worth and mood regulation and appetite control. It's kind of like a bit of a vicious cycle. So feeling good about who we are, having regular and stable moods, that's going to allow us to have better appetite control and make healthier choices when it comes to what we eat. Sensory perception is another big part of what serotonin does for us, but it's also why sometimes when we have too much serotonin, we're more likely to feel pain. It's interesting, isn't it? So you want to get just the right balance of these. Serotonin plays a role in gut health, and it actually increases bowel motility, which means that if you feel a little bit sluggish in your digestive system, or if you suffer from constipation, serotonin may actually be low. And it plays a role in cardiovascular function. So this is a little bit like the summary sheet for serotonin, because if we flip forwards a slide, you can see that serotonin, as just one example, actually plays a role in all of the systems in our bodies, from our gastrointestinal system through to our reproductive system, through to our kidneys and genitourinary system, through to the lungs, and also, of course, to brain and focus and cognition and heart function as well. So We're just only really breaking it down into the mood-related aspects of what these chemicals do, but they all do a lot more than what we're looking at here. Really fascinating. So with dopamine, dopamine is known to be our mood and motivation molecule, which means that when you're feeling a lot of determination and drive and you're able to push projects through or finish projects that you begin, then your dopamine levels are going to be pretty good. But on the other hand, if you're finding that you're a little bit less attentive to things, less driven, and it's difficult to get up in the morning, it's hard to embrace the day, then dopamine may be low. So some of the things that dopamine does for us is it drives our reward-seeking behaviors, and it allows us to establish links between things we enjoy and activities that we're doing. So the pleasure activity connection, it allows us to make that connection. It drives our curiosity and makes us more attentive, focused, and curious when we're working or when we're going through our daily lives. Helps us with memory. And very importantly, it helps us to learn, because a lot of these things, reward-seeking, curiosity, attention, memory, these are all relating to our ability to learn and to cognize. Dopamine's also involved in deep thinking, so allowing us to really, maybe even if you like, go down the rabbit hole with things, but get into a very deep way, enriched way about thinking and learning. So very important for younger people to have enough dopamine. Also important that younger people don't overutilize their dopamine by triggering dopamine pathways all the time. So that would be the perhaps the focus for a different webinar, but yeah, definitely dopamine overstimulation is related to a lot of device use. And another thing that dopamine does for us is motor coordination. So it helps our brain and muscles communicate with each other. And when they do that well, we get a lot of smooth muscle movement. When they don't do that well, we get tremors and we get things like restless leg syndrome. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is a molecule for love and connection. We develop and release oxytocin when we're in situations where we feel like we're interacting with other people, we're enjoying this, we're feeling senses of love and connection with others. So as you can imagine, coming out of lockdowns and pandemics, the oxytocin levels probably weren't up to speed, what they would have been pre-pandemic time. And oxytocin is really important for us to develop trust in relationship, to feel sociable, to want to be socially engaged with the world, to feel safe and secure in doing that. It's involved in things like eye contact during conversation and our ability to bond and be in monogamous relationships as well. So oxytocin there is one that we would want to definitely foster, just so that we can enjoy life more. And endorphins is our last chemical that we're looking at today. Endorphins are basically pain relievers in our bodies, and they get released when we're in situations of trauma or pain or perhaps discomfort. So endorphins really play a protective role. They stop our bodies from feeling and sensing pain, and they at the same time help us to feel euphoria. As you can imagine, we could all do with a few more endorphins now and then. So pain relief, feelings of well-being, relief of anxiety, and endorphins also play a role in self-esteem and cognition and appetite regulation as well. So these are the four that we're going to tailor our diets for to be able to produce more of them internally. To do this, we want to look at where they're made, because where they're made means this is where we need to nourish ourselves internally. So serotonin and dopamine are produced in both the gut and the brain. Serotonin is produced predominantly in the gut. Dopamine, about half of it's produced in your gut and half of it's produced in your brain. But the dopamine produced in your gut is a lot more powerful than the dopamine produced in your brain. So if you want to improve serotonin and dopamine levels, this means that you would want to be taking care of your gut health. And if you do happen to have a chronic gut condition, that in itself might be limiting the amount of serotonin and dopamine that you create. Here are some deficiency signs of these two. So with serotonin, if it happens to be low, At the initial stages, you're probably looking at things like anxiety and insomnia and constipation. So there'll be a general sense of this sort of this anxious and more vigilant experience of life. And if the serotonin starts to get more and more depleted, then you move into things like low pain tolerance, obsessive compulsive disorder, perhaps aggression, but I don't see that very often, and definitely depression. So low mood and generally a flat affect. So that's when serotonin's getting really low. But for most of us, we could be just on the verge of having low serotonin at times. So look out for things like that, panic, anxiety, worry, and things like that. With dopamine, when dopamine gets low, the main thing that you will notice is that you'll be less likely to want to get up in the morning. You'll be less motivated about life, less driven with the work that you're doing or the learning that you're undertaking. So it's in that sort of cognitive realm and that lack of motivation for life. If dopamine does happen to get quite deficient, then you're moving into things like muscle tightness. You might get tremors in the muscles, hands particularly, and feet. You might get restless leg syndrome when you're trying to sleep as well. And low libido, generally just a dull effect through life is what you would expect to see with dopamine. This is one that if you're a parent, you would want to be on the lookout for any of these signs with your child, particularly, tweens and teenagers as well, but particularly tweens and younger. So any of these signs would suggest, working on dopamine levels and reducing dopamine stimulation. Now, oxytocin and endorphins are produced predominantly in the brain. So this means that in order to improve the levels of these ones, rather than looking simply at gut and managing gut conditions, you want to have an antioxidant lifestyle, because oxidation is really what leads to the breakdown in the brain of oxytocin and endorphins. So when it comes time to show you the meal plans, I do have an option here for you if this is more what you're looking at. Now, oxytocin, if it's deficient, you might be likely to experience things like social isolation behaviors. Perhaps social awkwardness could fit in there as well, and anxiety and depression and some sleep disturbance. Usually it doesn't get too deficient, but if it gets really deficient, it is linked to conditions like schizophrenia, moderately deficient, linked to conditions like autism as well. So a lot of these social behaviors are linked to oxytocin, or say social behavioral issues. And with endorphins, if endorphins are low, the first thing you'll notice is an increased sensation of pain or a reduced tolerance of pain. You might get some mood swings, a bit more anxiety, a bit more antisocial behaviors coming in here as well. Impulsivity, and really this is where the diet becomes difficult to manage. If endorphins are low, you'll have a lot of carbohydrate cravings because you're really looking for that quick pain reliever and that quick mood booster. Because endorphins, unlike the others, they switch in very quickly, instantaneous. So when you're looking for things to give you a quick lift, you'll probably be looking through the diet. So those are our four neurochemicals, where they're made and what happens when they're deficient. As a 4-step plan, I would suggest that this is how you approach working with building these chemicals. The first thing you would want to do is reduce oxidative strain on your brain and body, because oxidation breaks them down. So you've got some tips on the right for some things you can do now, as of today, that will help you to reduce the breakdown of serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins. Second, most importantly, to nourish your emotional body, take care of your mental well-being, meditate daily, things like that. Meditation is a great way to cleanse your mind, and antioxidants is a great way to cleanse your body. So it's really about cleansing and putting a lot of good, positive impressions back into your body, enjoying long baths, walks in nature, and things like that. And thirdly, really optimize your gut health, because a lot of the research on neurochemistry and mental well-being tells us that we can use foods and nutrients and herbs to increase the production of things like serotonin and dopamine. But we do need to be able to assimilate in our gut, and we need to be able to have a healthy gut so that we produce them in our guts. So it's very important to look at things like managing gut conditions. And you can come and see me if you wanted to work on a chronic gut condition, help you to assimilate and improve your production of these chemicals internally. And lastly, eat the feel-good diet, because really it's designed to help you upregulate the synthesis of all of these chemicals. So we're going to have a look now at which foods you would use to be able to boost these chemicals. I've divided this into two slides. So the first slide will look at serotonin and dopamine, and the second will look at oxytocin and endorphins. Now, I've given you the neurochemical names here, serotonin and dopamine, and I've given you the amino acids that they're built from, because all of these foods are really based on the amino acids that produce serotonin, or the amino acids that produce dopamine. So for instance, in the serotonin list, you've got options here for vegetables, meat and fish, different types of fruit, and other foods that are going to increase your ability to make serotonin. And that's because they either contain tryptophan or they contain some of the vitamins and minerals that your body uses to make tryptophan with. So we are giving your body all the resources that it needs to be able to produce these chemicals. You'll notice that it's quite a protein-rich list here as well, because proteins are where we get our amino acids from. So we need a lot of protein-rich foods to be able to get the building blocks for serotonin and dopamine. And you can have a look at this, at your leisure later on. And I would recommend just going through and picking out different foods that you like, that you enjoy, and seeing where you can work them into your diet. And then also when I give you your diet planners, you'll see how I've worked some of these foods into the diet plan as well. So for serotonin, if you were thinking of boosting serotonin, you would really want to be eating to feel more good about life, to feel more relaxed about your life and you and where you're at, to feel that general calming effect and a little bit of that mood boost, to feel more positive. That's where I would, use the serotonin-rich foods. With dopamine, I would definitely be eating a lot more of these types of foods. If you were starting to feel like you were a bit lost in life, maybe you're thinking, I need some redirection. I'm finding it hard to focus. I'm finding it hard to learn and remember things and to concentrate. The dopamine-rich foods would be really good for you here too. So have a look through those later on and see which lists you can draw some inspiration from. One of the things I also wanted to point out to you was that in the milk, yogurt, cheese, and nuts, there are quite a lot of cheeses. And it's interesting that cheese, with a lot of the building blocks for serotonin and dopamine, they're based on fermented product. So when you look at fermented foods, they do tend to give you a lot of the precursors to make your feel-good chemistry. So if you enjoy your cheese, maybe you have to think about which types of cheese are going to be better for you. And I've included quite a few here. These are all clinically trialed to demonstrate that they increase your production of serotonin and dopamine. I've put some herbs in here as well. So if you enjoy your herbal teas, you could definitely go away, start making some, things like turmeric lattes. And there are wonderful herbs out there that a lot of us haven't even tried, so I use them quite a lot in clinic, but you might want to Google, have a look if you can find some ashwagandha lattes and things like that. They will also help you to boost your production of feel-good chemistry. Now here's the second slide. So these ones are looking at oxytocin and endorphins, and the foods are either based on the precursors or the cofactors to these chemicals. With oxytocin, what's interesting about the diet for oxytocin is it needs to be highly antioxidant. So a lot of the foods that you find in this list are either grains or fruits or vegetables that have a high antioxidant profile. That means they stop your body oxidizing and stop free radicals from damaging your mitochondria and mitochondrial DNA. So you've got a lot of cruciferous vegetables here that are green in color. Broccoli, kale, you've got different types of peppers in here. You've also got things like seaweed. You've actually got a lot of green foods, which tend to be antioxidant. And in the endorphin section, it's quite different to the others, because with endorphins, what you're wanting to do is to really improve your immediate euphoric sensation. So you'll find things here like chili peppers, cacao, dark chocolate, even soy products, and so on. So it's quite specific for endorphins. And I think if you're wanting to look at diet regulation, how you eat and make better choices with your diet, the endorphins section is one that I would really look at. Definitely things like oily fish, very good for endorphins as well. Now, I don't want to just give you foods. I also want to give you supplements because, you know, I'm sure that a lot of you are taking supplements of some sort. So in the top two rows here, for each of the neurochemicals, you have the vitamins and minerals that are either essential for their production or they're called cofactors. This means that when your body's actually manufacturing serotonin, it's utilizing some magnesium, it's utilizing some iron and zinc, and it's using vitamin C and vitamin Bs to actually make the serotonin. And it's a similar story for the rest of the chemicals here. So conversely, you could say that, well, if I'm deficient in serotonin, maybe I'm deficient in magnesium. You know, in particular, magnesium is very important for serotonin production. Or if I'm deficient in dopamine, maybe I'm deficient in iron. So it can work both ways, where you can get deficiency in the chemical as a result of being deficient in the mineral, and vice versa. So for serotonin, there are some of these supplements that need to be prescribed, and that's understandable because, as I said before, you don't want too high levels, you don't want too low levels. So some of them need to be prescribed, things like glycine, anti-inflammatory supplements, and so on, antioxidant supplements. But you can go ahead and start taking things like omega-3. You can take lactobacillus, acidophilus, bifidobacterium, probiotics. You can take spirulina, and so on. So you can, of course, find yourself some magnesium, iron, and zinc. For dopamine, there are different types of probiotic strains that really help with dopamine production. And of course, the probiotics are so important for anything you produce in your gut. So we've got Lactobacillus plantarum and rhamnosus, which have been found clinically to increase dopamine synthesis. And vitamin D3 is very important as well. For oxytocin, bioflavonoids and vitamin C, and even vitamin E, are wonderful antioxidants to make sure that you don't break too much oxytocin down. So that's going to have you feeling social, vibrant, positive, and ready to go out into the world. Estrogen boosting herbal medicines can also be really good for oxytocin levels, and chamomile can be really good in therapeutic doses. So that's something that you probably see a naturopath or herbalist for. And for endorphins, it's really important to have oily fish, vitamin D, D3 particularly, EPA, DHA, omegas, and maybe some adaptogenic herbs as well, because we do know that some herbs like cacao, for instance, have the ability to increase your endorphin levels. So they're the supplements that you might like to think about exploring. And I want to show you some sample diets as well. So the three diets that I've prepared, the first one is a vegetarian lacto-ovo. So just for some of us, we may not eat meat, so this will give you the ability to improve your neurochemical synthesis without having to include meat in the diet. And you'll notice here that the diet is predominantly savory, and that's because sugars and sweets and carbohydrates, they tend to actually increase oxidation in our bodies, and that means more breakdown of your dopamine and serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. So things for breakfast like whole grain toast, which is going to give you lovely levels of oxytocin, avocado, eggs, they're going to improve your serotonin levels and dopamine levels. Things like instant oats will improve endorphin levels and oxytocin levels. Goji berries, antioxidant fruits like pears and apples are going to be wonderful for oxytocin and endorphin levels. And you might even like to try a gut healing vegan broth, just for, if you like fasting, if you find that's a good way to stop the bloating and so on with breakfast, then you might like to try something like a vegan broth. And what I would recommend is that you don't feel like you have to follow this diet as it's written, but you could jumble and mix things around. And if there are certain foods that you found that you prefer that are good for you and improve other types of neurochemical levels, foods we've looked at in the previous slides, you could work them in here as well. Switch up your fruits, switch up your grains and things like that. Now, I've got some wonderful recipes for you all. So anything with an asterisk has a dedicated recipe, and I'll be sending out all of the recipe links probably tomorrow morning. So if you did want to get started on this, you could even get started tomorrow on planning your next shopping list. This is a non-vegetarian option for you here. So for those of us who are okay eating protein, eating meats and so on, you'll notice that you've got meats like turkey in here, you've got beef, salmon, fish. So these are known to be very good for improving dopamine and serotonin levels particularly. You'll also notice that it's predominantly savory. That's going to be wonderful news for your energy levels, for your glucose regulation, and generally for your antioxidant status. But I have thrown a few treats in here because, we can't live without a few treats. And oxytocin gets boosted every time we do something that's self-loving. So I have put in some vegan halva here for you, some dark chocolate turmeric truffles, rustic pear tart. So you definitely could have, like one meal a day where it's a bit of an indulgence and it's something that makes you feel good and feel positive. That's really important as well. Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I think you're actually going to love these recipes. I did take a little bit of time finding them all for you, so quite excited to share them with you. So I work a lot with inflammatory conditions, so I've included an anti-inflammatory option for you here. These are the foods, and they're similar to the ones in the previous slides, the previous plans, but there are some new ones in here as well. These are the ones that will reduce oxidative stress in your body and reduce the breakdown of those neurochemicals that we've been talking about that are so important for our mood. But another thing they will do is they'll nourish your gut. So if you do happen to want to improve your gut assimilation of all of the minerals and vitamins, and now that you produce so many of these chemicals in your gut, this diet will allow you to improve gut health and get better results. If you have a chronic inflammatory condition as well, things like psoriasis, chronic eczema, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, anything like IBS, even in terms of mental and emotional well-being, chronically painful periods, that sort of thing, this diet would be the one that I probably would start with. We've got some delicious little things in here, including different types of fruits that are particularly good as anti-inflammatory fruits and so on. And again, you could mix it up, you could mix and match. So if you want to have a little bit more meat in there, you could bring in some of those previous recipes from the non-vegetarian diet guide. So those are our 3 diet planners, everybody. Hope you enjoy them, and I'll be sharing those recipes with you soon. So this is a little bit of a supermarket map, and I wanted to give you an idea of where to go in the supermarket and where not to go as well. So most supermarkets will have a similar layout to this, where you come in and you enter into the supermarket down here, and then you'll go straight into the produce section. This is where you'll find a lot of foods that are naturally going to improve your serotonin levels. So vitamin C rich foods, which will also be great for oxytocin levels. All your fruits and veggies here, this is probably the first place you would stop to stock up on a lot of those red, yellow, green fruits and veggies. You can also get good magnesium sources here with your green leafy vegetables. And as you move on through the bakery, if you're looking at things like endogenous opioid production, oxytocin and serotonin, then you could buy things like whole grains here. You could buy foods that have gluten in them, which are actually good for endogenous opioids and endorphins. But I understand that some of us don't do well on gluten, so you could choose to avoid it or not there. Nuts and nut butters can be found here as well. They're really fantastic for all neurochemicals, but particularly serotonin and magnesium levels. And then as you move on through to the dairy section, this is where you're going to be able to improve dopamine levels and endogenous opioids or endorphins. So getting some dairy into your diet, particularly those cheeses, will help you build dopamine levels and also serotonin. When you come to meat and poultry, you'll be looking probably at chicken and turkey as the main sources. Then you would move on to fish, and then you would move on to red meat. And these will be building your serotonin and dopamine levels here. As you come across to seafood, you'd mainly be buying seafood to build your dopamine levels. But we do know that there is some correlation between oily fish causing endorphins and serotonin as well. And when you come down to more of the medicinal sections or the supplements, think about getting a good probiotic. Maybe get a yogurt. Jalna yogurts are really good, and they actually give us a lot of the probiotics that have been clinically trialed to show that they improve serotonin levels, dopamine levels, and so on. So just your classic supermarket Jalna natural yogurt's really good there. You can get things like dandelion root tea here as well, and maybe even get some fiber supplements if you need to. In terms of teas and coffee sections, coffee, turmeric, lattes, these are really good for serotonin and dopamine production. So obviously, naturopaths don't always recommend coffee, but I do recommend it for people who want to build their serotonin and dopamine levels, and also for people with chronic lung diseases as well, because coffee helps to open the bronchioles, helps us to breathe a bit more easily. Now, in the center aisles of the supermarket, this is pretty much your no-go zone, partly because this is where all the processed foods are, the things that seem to last for 1 or 2 years. Of course, there is the health food section where you can get things like seeds, natural produce, but predominantly avoid carbs, fats, and sodas and make them your no-go zones. One last thing, everybody, have a look at whether or not you're doing anything that might potentially be sabotaging you from producing serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins. And these are things you can change today. So on the left, you've got a little list here to have a look through later on. If you are, doing any of these things regularly, they will be reducing your production of these feel-good chemicals. And on the right side, if you happen to experience any of these conditions, they also may be, limiting the number of neurochemicals you can produce. So always think about maybe seeing a naturopath or a herbalist to help you work through any of those. And as I said, we have come through a time, after the pandemics of trauma and stress, and many of us lost people that we love. We've had changes in our jobs and other, living circumstances. So if you or someone that needs extra support, you've got some contact information here. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, everybody. Thank you so much for listening along. Now, I would love to know if anyone's got any questions at this point in time. Feel free to put your questions into the chat box. You're very welcome to turn your mic on too now, if you like. If you have any questions to ask, we've got about 10 minutes here. So Kathy's wondering about nightshades. Are they inflammatory? So some people will have intolerances to the nightshade family, and we're talking about plants like potatoes and tomatoes here, basically Solanaceae family. So if you've had any of those sorts of symptoms, such as brain fog, itchy skin after eating, headaches, then you might think about, that potentially these nightshade foods are not good for me. They are causing inflammation. I do actually have a list of salicylate allergy Solanaceae allergy symptoms. So feel free to get in touch if you wanted to run through that with me, because I can let you know whether that's likely or not. In that case, you probably wouldn't have those foods. But for many of us, the best thing to do, everybody, is not to remove anything completely from your diet, but to have a good rounded balance in your diet and let your body naturally learn to manage these things. If you do have allergies, intolerances, then that's worth working on as well. And building your gut function will help you to overcome some of those intolerances too. You're so welcome, Fiona. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you, Ebolia. So lovely to have you here, and really glad that you all came. I'm wishing you a very fun grocery shop. Look out in the emails for all of those recipes as well, because that just makes life a lot easier, doesn't it? Yeah, and please do stay in touch, everybody. I'm on the socials too, so you'll have all of my details, I think, from the emails as well. Yeah, wonderful. Go enjoy maybe a piece of dark chocolate now and then. Yeah, one of my favorite things to do, because I've been sugar-free for a long time, but I do like to have that odd indulgence. You're so welcome. I'll be sending you those slides too, everybody, so you'll have a copy of the slides. And yeah, if you were interested in having a re-look at the webinar later on, let me know. I can pop it onto my YouTube channel for you all. Yeah, you're so welcome. Now, if you didn't have any questions and you wanted to go, please feel free to drop off, everybody. Have a lovely day. Wishing you so much health and wellness. Yes, I do Zoom consults. Absolutely. Yeah, just get in touch. We can talk about setting something up for you. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Mandy. Thank you, Claire.